You know, I grew up in a Christian home. In fact, I grew up in a pastor's home. I'm fourth generation pastor on both sides of my family. And I grew up with a passionate father. And he's so passionate, I can remember going to our sporting events as a kid. And my dad would get so into the game. He was so engaged. I remember one time I was probably in the sixth grade playing basketball. And my dad saw this play that happened and I got fouled. And the ref didn't call the foul. And my dad shouted out with everything. He said, "Hey ref, what are you, blind?" And I'll never forget it being a sixth grader, the referee stopping the game and saying, "Reverend, you're out of here." I mean, my dad, the pastor, got kicked out of the game. You say, "Rich, why do you tell me that story?" I tell you that story because down deep, there's this desire in all of us to be great, to be the best, to be first. I mean, think about yourself for a moment. Let's say you go to a restaurant. When you go to a restaurant, you don't ever say, "Hey, what's the most average thing on the menu?" No, you ask the server for the best thing on the menu. When you go see a movie, you don't go up to the person at the counter and say, "Hey, what's the most, mediocre movie you're playing?" No, you ask people, "What's the best movie I can see?" When you go to buy an apartment or rent a home, you always go and ask the question, "Hey, what's the best I can get with the money that I have?" You say, "Rich, what's the point?" The point is down deep in all of us, we are laced with this DNA to desire greatness. We all want to be great. What if I told you that the friend of sinners, Jesus Christ, he gives us a pathway to greatness? You see, up until now, we've been talking about the message of the friend of sinners. What's Jesus' message? He didn't come to make bad people good. He came to make dead people alive. But he also came not just to save us, he came to sustain us. And in doing so, he helps us understand that we've got to see the lost found, that all of us, apart from him, we are lost. But as we talked in the last session, he gives us a mission, and that mission is that we would live our life comfortably uncomfortable. But lastly, in this session, I want to talk to you about the fact that when you get into a relationship with Jesus, he actually gives you a purpose, and he actually gives you a pathway to that purpose. You were designed for greatness, by greatness. And before you flip out and before you start to think, "Oh, I don't think this is a good Christian message," well, I want to point your attention to a story found in Mark chapter 9. And it's a beautiful story. In fact, the Bible says that Jesus, he had just gotten done doing a miracle and he's with his disciples and they're essentially on a road trip. When I was a kid, my parents, they used to take us on road trips and we'd be traveling. And every little kid always stops and asks their parents the same question: "Are we there yet?" I think many times in following Jesus, we ask the same question: "Hey, are we there yet?" And we fail to remember that if you want to reach your purpose, you're going to have to go through the process. We all want to arrive, but few of us are willing to take the trip. Let me encourage you, the trip with Jesus is where you will discover what you were designed for. But as they're on this road trip, these kids, these disciples, they're arguing amongst themselves. And when they get to the place of their destination, Jesus looks at the disciples and says, "Hey, what were you guys arguing about on the trip?" I always think it's funny because Jesus, he knows everything, yet he still asks them a question. These guys, they respond, "Yeah, we were wondering who the greatest is among us." I find that so funny that they could have Jesus Christ, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, fairest of the fair, Rose of Sharon, Lily of the Valley, first and last, beginning and end, Alpha and Omega. He could be in their minivan, yet somehow their eyes are not on him, their eyes are on themselves. And they're debating and discussing something so petty and so silly. Who's the greatest among us? Sometimes we Christians, we can get so caught up talking about things that really don't matter. I meet so many believers that they live their whole life defending Jesus. Guess what? Jesus doesn't need to be defended. He needs to be preached. He needs to be proclaimed. Recently, I was at a conference and I finished speaking and this gentleman came up to me and he asked me this very sophisticated question. He said, "Rich, I'm curious, what is the VOUS Church's stance on eschatology? Are you pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib?" I said, "Bro, to be honest with you, we're just trying to live till Thursday." I started to laugh because I thought it was so interesting that he cared so much about a minor detail when all the while there's people all around us that are so lost to the fact that Jesus Christ, he loves them and has a plan for them. I want to spend my life not focused on the rapture, but rather I want to spend my life bringing a rapture of God's love every single day. Nonetheless, they're discussing and debating who's the greatest. And watch what Jesus does in Mark chapter 9. You would think that he would put them down. You think he would scold them. You think he would discipline them. You think he would look at them and say, hey, why are you asking such a silly question? I'm the greatest. But Jesus does not do that. Rather, Jesus gives them a pathway to greatness. He gives them a pathway to their purpose. This is what I love about the friend of sinners, is that he saves you, he transforms you, but he purposes you. This is what he says to them. He says, if you want to be great, you must be willing to be last. For the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. See, many of us, we have the wrong definition of greatness. We think to be great means to be known. Or even worse than that, we think to be great means to be better than everyone else around us. You know, the quickest way to kill your contentment is through comparison. And Jesus says, no, none of those are the route or the path to greatness. None of those are the things that will satisfy your soul. You can be seduced by success, but there's only one way that you can step into this hardwired DNA that you have, this desire for greatness. And the way you do so is through service. Jesus is saying you must be willing to be last. Maybe right now you're going, well, if I'm last, how can I be first? Well, the only way you can be last and be first is if you change directions. And that's what Jesus does. He changes the direction. He changes the goal. And he says, you can go lower. You see, if service is beneath you, well, then leadership is beyond you. Jesus Christ, he calls us to serve. How to be great? We can all be great because we can all serve one another. Not just those that we like, not just those that are our good friends, not just those that we share the same interest in, but we can serve those that will never thank us, never ever affirm us. We can even serve those that will never even know that we served them. See, Jesus, the master teacher that he is, he doesn't scold them or discipline them, but rather he's trying to show them that he has a pathway to this desire to be great. He says, you must be willing to be last. You must be willing to go lower. See, in this last session, what I want you to understand about the friend of sinners is that everything about him is a paradox. The way up is down. If you want to get, then you have to give. And honestly, he calls us to go lower, to love even our enemies. What Jesus will do in the text that I find to be fascinating is while he's sharing this lesson and while he's rerouting them and redirecting them, he grabs a little child and he says, the truth is, if you welcome one of these children, you welcome me. And if you're unwilling to welcome these children, well, then you haven't welcomed me. And when you're reading the story in Mark chapter 9, you can go, wait, Jesus, why are you bringing a child into this story? What's the point of this kid? Yet everything with Jesus has a purpose and has a point. Recently, I was studying for a sermon, and I was doing so out by a pool at a hotel. I know it's a really tough life here in Miami, but you know what? Someone had to go. I'm being persecuted for the gospel. Here I am, Lord. Send me, Miami, Florida, to the beach. I'm doing some study, and as I'm studying, I'm watching this father, and he's all alone, but he has 3 sons with him. He's got one boy who's about 5 years of age. Then he's got 2 twin boys that are probably 3 to 4 years of age. They're all in the water. They're all swimming. And I'm watching this dad as he's getting ready to ask these kids to get out of the water. And just from the look of him, I can tell this is about to be a real bit of effort. He's stretching. He's getting himself ready. He's exhaling. Here we go. I got to get these kids out of the water. And so he gets up to the pool and he says, hey, Cody, come on, Cody, time to get out. And Cody just goes, no, Dad, I want to stay in the water. He goes, Cody, get out. You got to get out. And finally, he convinces Cody to get out of the water, and he puts Cody down on this recliner and he gives him his toys. He says, okay, Cody, you sit right there. Then he makes his way back out to get one of the first of the twins. And as he gets up to the edge of the water, he says, hey, Zach, come on, Zach. It's time to get out of the water. And as he starts to encourage Zach to get out of the water, Cody runs right by him, trying to jump back into the pool. He says, no. Sit back down, Cody. Zach, you get out. Zach's got his life jacket on and his water wings on. None of these kids can swim. And Cody and Zach, they're going, no, Dad, we don't want to get out of the water. And finally, he gets Zach out. Now he's got both boys out. They're both complaining. They're both crying. You can see the dad. He's 10 minutes into this episode. Now he's back at the pool. He's going, come on, Johnny, time to get out of the water. And as he's trying to get Johnny out of the water, Cody runs by again. Then Zach runs by, and the dad's trying to get him. And all the while, I'm watching this poor father exert all of this energy. And I'm thinking to myself, and I kind of chuckle to myself, oh my goodness. This dad just saved those boys' lives like 72 times. And not one time did they ever even thank him. In fact, it was the opposite. They got mad at him. They complained towards him. Yet I believe that this is a picture of true service. And I believe this is a picture as Jesus brings these little children into his story, into his sermon. He's trying to give you and I a practical picture of what it looks like to be in relationship with the friend of sinners, to be in relationship with the God who will give you a purpose on this earth. And the purpose he has given you is that you are to serve. Serve who? Serve even little children who will never mention you, who will never tweet about you, who can't vote for you, who can't fund you. In fact, most of the time when you serve a child, they complain about it. Yet it's only right here in this moment that we capture the essence of what real service is. That if you're too big to serve, friend, you're too small to lead. Martin Luther King, he said it this way: anyone can be great because anyone can serve. And inside of all of us, we have this itch, we have this desire to be great. And I want to let you know that Jesus Christ, the friend of sinners, he can scratch that itch when you go low and you start to serve. I think in this day and age, sometimes we can make our faith just some little thing in our life. But the heart of this book and the heart of these messages in Friend of Sinners is that you would give Jesus your entire life and that you would understand that he is the way, the truth, and the life. In fact, in early Christianity, we weren't even known as Christians. We were simply known as the way. What did that mean? It meant that we knew the way home. We knew the way to purpose. We knew the way to our destiny. We knew the way to heaven. We knew the way to God. I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves of who we are, that we are people of the way. We have the way to real greatness, greatness that will last. A few years ago, my wife and I, we were in Indonesia, and we were leaving Bali, Indonesia. I was in an airport. And as I was in this airport, nobody was speaking English, and I was so confused as where I needed to go. But praise God, in the middle of the airport, I saw this big, massive kiosk. And on the front of the kiosk, in English, it read, "Help Desk." I said, yes, that is my help. And so I walked over, and there was this woman who was standing behind the counter. I said, "Ma'am, can you help me find my gate?" She looked at me, didn't say a word, then she just looked past me. I thought, that's kind of rude. I said, "Ma'am, excuse me." I just spoke louder. I said, "Ma'am, please give me your attention. Can you help me find my gate?" She looked at me again and looked past me a second time. Now I was kind of getting a little bit frustrated, a little bit irked. I said, "Ma'am, listen to me. I need your help." And while I'm on my third go around, another woman walks up and says, "Sir, what's going on? Are you okay?" I just said, "Hey, I'm at the help desk and I'm trying to get help." At that moment, she started to talk to the woman in a different language. And she looked back at me after talking to the woman behind the desk and she said, "Oh, sir, this woman, she doesn't work here at the help desk. She's just sitting at the help desk. And sir, not only that, she doesn't speak any English." And I thought to myself, how crazy is it that you don't speak English, yet you're sitting at a desk that says help desk, but you don't even work at the help desk? That is confusing. It's about as confusing as every person who takes on the title of Christian. Ultimately, when you call yourself a Christian, you're saying, here I am. I am the help desk. I am open and ready to serve you. Yet I wonder how many times people come to us in need of help, in need of aid. Yet when they come to us, we look right past them. We don't say a word. And ultimately, we look back and say, hey, I'm not on duty today, and I'm not speaking your language. Friend, we're Christians. We're not people of convenience. We're people of conviction. We've met the friend of sinners, and he's given us a purpose on the earth, and that is to befriend those that are hurting, to bring help to those who speak different than us, who look different than us, who don't know the way to greatness, who don't know the way to their purpose. See, this was Jesus. Every part of his life, you'll find him doing this. He always goes lower. He always goes further. Isn't he like that father at the pool, that he went to the cross and he bled and he died to cover and wash all of our sins? In fact, he died for us while we were cursing him, while we were complaining about him. And Jesus, all the while, always had a purpose, and that is, I came to serve humanity. I didn't come to be served. In fact, he says, I came to serve. One of the most riveting stories you'll read in the Bible is the story of Judas Iscariot. In fact, if you were to look up the name or the word sinner in the Bible, I would assume in most people's minds, the picture of Judas Iscariot, well, he would be pictured right next to that word sinner. I think all of us can agree that the one who betrayed Jesus Christ with a kiss, well, he probably was a bad guy with wrong motives and wrong intentions. Judas Iscariot, a man who traveled with Jesus for 3 years, witnessed his miracles, witnessed him walking on water, witnessed him healing blinded eyes and feeding the multitudes. I mean, he saw it all and he experienced it all. Yet for 30 pieces of silver, he sold Jesus out. Yet there's a moment in the story that maybe you've missed before. And that's the moment that when Judas leads the angry mob towards Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Judas comes, and as he finds Jesus, Jesus sees Judas, and Jesus looks at Judas, and what does he say? He says, friend, do what you came to do. What a picture of service. What a picture of the greatest man who ever lived. As Judas was betraying Jesus, Jesus was still calling him friend. In fact, the last words that Judas ever heard from Jesus were these simple words, friend. Why? Because it's who Jesus is. He's the friend of sinners. And if you have air in your lungs, well, he's still pursuing you. If you have a pulse, you still have a purpose. You might have thought that you've done such bad things, such evil things. No, my friend, this is the God who calls you friend while you betray him. He serves you up until the very end. How to be great? It's simple. You got to be willing to be last. I think all of us can agree that after we meet this friend of sinners, Jesus, that we too, we can go and we can befriend the sinners that we know. It's our purpose. As we go lower, ultimately, we will go higher.